Hello. We'll be starting in just a couple minutes. It's 3:30. Today we're going to try a little bit of a different format. Today our webinar is going to be more of a panel discussion and more of like a podcast feel to it. We're trying some different things with our digital outreach. So we'll get started here in just a minute as soon as we have 2 more minutes for folks to get settled in. So be patient and we'll get started here in just a minute. It's really hard to sit in silence that long. That's tough. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome to our 20-second security tips for working remotely. My name is Andrew Moore, COO of the IronEdge Group. And IronEdge Group is going to be, we'll say, sponsoring our webinar / what we hope to be kind of an inaugural podcast today. So we're going to work on that format a little bit. So I'll tell you a little bit about IronEdge Group so we can get rid of the advertisement and move on to the fun part of the presentation. So we appreciate everybody joining us. If you have questions, please submit your questions in the Q&A area, and we will do our best to answer your questions after our presentation, potentially on our next presentation in a week or online. And if you are a client of our organization, you can reach out to your account manager and they will work to get your questions answered post haste. So again, thanks for joining us. Talk for a second about who IronEdge Group is. IronEdge Group is the premier IT solutions provider for Texas-based businesses. We provide service-centric strategy and support to eliminate frustration companies face with technology. So if you're having a tough time with tech, we're the company to come to. A lot of the times organizations come to us when they're concerned about losing data due to not having their stuff backed up, or they want to make sure that they don't lose revenue, clients, IP due to a cyber attack. So today we're going to be focused a little bit on that second component of why clients work with us, which is to talk a little bit about cyber policies, cyber best practices, basically 20-second things that people can do, whether it's your employees or you, to be more secure and better focused when you're working remote or in the office. So jump right into remote workforce security. And I'll introduce our panel today who will be joining us. I have Dan Mallard, who is one of our senior team members out of our San Antonio, Austin office. He's been doing IT for a really long time. And we've got Branson Braid, who is our senior sales engineer here in the Houston market. And they're going to help me hopefully make this a little bit interesting, a little less dry, and something that we all can walk away from this and share the information with other people so that people will adopt these processes. So I'll talk a little bit about the remote workforce and why it's important, right? So again, back to our theme that we've been beating since March is that 10 years worth of digital transformation has happened in the last 6 months, right? So things are changed, things are different. These were good best practices a year ago, 6 months ago. They're even more prescient today. Just like washing your hands was really something important that you should have been doing a long time ago, right? Otherwise, you get COVID. I'm not looking at Dan, but I am looking at Dan.
What?
Right? So But it's probably not because you didn't wash your hands, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We never know.
So the best practices that you want to focus on are when it comes to IT security is to find the small things that add up to the most important things, right, guys?
Yeah, agreed.
So our goal of today is just to make sure that everybody knows that remote workforces are not in an office. There's not that inherent culture of people being around each other or being keen ears up because you're sitting in a place that reminds you, oh, hey, this isn't my house, right? I'm in an organization. I'm in a company. I'm working on a secure network, and we want to make sure that the organizations that we're working with realize that 60% of data security issues come from bad user habits, right? And they come from insecure endpoints. So, we've worked with other organizations, right? And we continue to engage with companies where a lot of their core focus is like, let's fix the firewall, right?
Right.
Let's implement a new Active Directory infrastructure.
Very tangible things.
That's important, but
yeah.
I mean, it's right now with everybody being remote, right? And everybody, it's not the most important thing in a lot of organizations, right? People should be more focused on what are my employees doing, right? And what's going on those computers, because those are all interfacing directly into their cloud applications. They're interfacing directly into the data that can be downloaded off their systems, and they're all on, in most cases, like a jank home network, right?
That no one's ever patched.
Yeah, right.
Or got into, or
with a router or a firewall from like the 90s.
Yeah, with the default password on top of that. Yeah,
right.
It changes a little bit of the scope for what we're actually looking at to secure.
Oh, for sure.
A little bit.
Yeah, right. we've pivoted as a company over the last 6 months to, focusing on somebody's corporate network and the layers of security that are built into that. And then over the last 3 or 4 months, now we're really paying attention to individual use habits, the endpoints. That's a big focus of ours in consulting right now.
Yeah, no doubt. So before we jump into the meat and potatoes, I do want to set the stage a little bit. And Dan and Branson have got a couple of areas that they want to touch on regarding like kind of what's going on in the news. So we'll start with Dan, the scam man.
Yes,
surprise.
The in-house coronavirus expert.
Yeah, you got picked to do this because you're the only surviving coronavirus person in our office so far. So congratulations.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor.
We're glad you're still healthy.
And that is true. And this is related to my own, catching the coronavirus. I've been really interested in the coronavirus related scams and IT related scams and phishing and things like that related to the coronavirus has been really interesting to me. So I've been keeping up with this for the last couple of months. And I thought some of the things that I thought were interesting, I wanted to share here because it ties back into our 20-second hygiene really well. So what a really effective way to phish people or to own people is to create a sense of urgency to the person you're trying to attack. And so what I mean by that is if you pose as a CEO of a company and you have a fake email address and you email a down level employee and you say, hey, this is the CEO and I need this thing urgently. I need it stat. I'm about to make a deal and I need this thing. I need a wire transfer. I need iTunes gift cards for a client. I need all this stuff. Well, a down level, anybody, when they see somebody like that reaches out to them, they're going to get anxious and they're going to want to attend to that right away. And the speed in which that they feel like they have to attend to can create a situation where people make mistakes and they would disregard the normal security processes that they normally would, right? It's a really effective way to get people.
Just because you're scaring the hell out of people, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? So if Ryan sends me an email and Ryan says, I need this thing taken care of right away, it's for a client.
Ryan doesn't do that.
He could, or somebody could. Okay, in fairness, let's pretend Ryan did that. And he said, I need this right away. It's for a client. I'm about to sign a deal. I'm about to do this. I'm about to go on vacation. I may disregard.
That becomes a priority.
Yeah, it becomes my priority and I want to attend to it quickly to make them happy, right? So that's the stage I want to set. So when you get people to move quickly, they tend to make mistakes. And then related to the coronavirus thing, what I've seen is being that I had to go get tested. And I've known plenty of people that went to go get tested.
And everybody's getting tested now.
Everybody.
Right? Like, so it's like a high probability that like, if you just send a text message out to every person in the entire United States, 1 out of every 3 people has probably had the test.
Yes. Yeah, and if so, say I was a malicious actor, right? And I wanted to send something that I wanted people to click on via a text or an email. I want it to be current and timely. So this is the perfect time to have a coronavirus type thing go out. And I want somebody to kind of disregard their security practices that they know about and just click it. Right? That's the goal here.
Oh, I'm waiting on my test.
Oh, exactly. And that's what I wanted to talk about today is, so I go in, I get my coronavirus test. I actually stayed in the doctor's office and waited 15 minutes and got my result. But plenty of people go out to their car and wait due to security or, keeping other people safe. People have to go home and wait several days, right? And so they're waiting anxiously for this coronavirus test result to know if they can go back in the community or do whatever, right? So it creates this sense of anxiety. And so then what we've seen in malicious attempts to get people is in their text messages. People are getting these malicious texts that say, hey, for your coronavirus results, click here. And
or they'll get an email.
Exactly. Or they'll get this email that says, hey, your coronavirus results are attached. So then what people do is they're like, oh, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. They click it. Right. And they disregard looking at the normal things that we're going to talk about here in a minute. They disregard the 20 seconds of kind of really analyzing this and understanding if it's legitimate. And they click it because they want the information. They want it fast. Right. And it's important. So I've seen a lot of that. And then there's also a lot of coronavirus related scamming related to contact tracing. So for me, a couple of weeks after I had the virus, which wasn't very timely, I got a call from Bexar County. And they went through this contact tracing dialogue with me where they want to know what I was doing and, who I saw, all this stuff, right? Well, people are doing the same thing and saying they're contact tracers and they need information from you. And this is via phone. And they're saying, okay, give me your name, give me your social security, give me your address, right? And there's those scams going on right now. Nope. So what I wanted to do is point out that right now, everybody's in a super highly sensitive state and everybody has a lot of anxiety. So be very, very careful like you normally would with your email habits and you're reviewing things on your phone, and take a second to understand if that test result is legitimate. And remember, we're going to talk about it through this podcast, but always call. You don't have to click this thing. Call somebody where you went. Call somebody to verify it's right. But that's what I wanted to talk about today is the timeliness of the coronavirus scams is very important right now. So don't disregard all the habits that you've learned to stay safe just because of this event. Stay vigilant when you're looking at this stuff.
Yeah, that's a great safety tip. Thanks, Egon. All right, so we'll move on to Branson, right? So Branson wants to talk about some other current events, right? And I love the fact that he chose this particular picture. And for those who are listening and not watching, like it's the old school purple Linksys, which is
what was that thing? WRT54G, something like that.
Yeah,
I had one.
You see the fact that that, Dan, that shows a lot about how long this thing has been around, but it also speaks to an important part of it. That when was the last time you touched one?
I haven't touched
a lot of people. A lot of
mine's right there.
People still have these in their homes. A lot of people are still using it. But the question is, how well do you actually know that router? We've talked a lot about the change from being in the office to being at home now. And a lot of times we bolster the security on the outside of our networks. So we bolster that firewall. We worry about our switch, but at home, we're only there a few hours during the day, so we're not too worried about it. And right now it's been trucking along, but how well do you know your router? Right. So with everyone being home now, they've seen an increase in the understanding that most people have never upgraded the firmware on their router.
Change passwords.
Change passwords. Yes. I mean, little things, but really pieces of security that in a enterprise environment, it comes second nature. We're aware of it. We ask IT. We say, is anybody taking care of this? Right. But at home, we just let it ride. Yeah. So with that, there are a lot of known vulnerabilities for these devices. And I myself, when coronavirus started, I had just actually upgraded my firewall. I hadn't touched my firewall in maybe 4 or 5 years. And I just happened to move and I decided, let me upgrade this device. But the reality is many people just have what's been operating at home.
But the other thing, right? So the interesting thing, right? So we were talking about this earlier, is that for a lot of folks, like I just moved from Uverse to Xfinity and it was life-changing, right? It was amazing because I did not like Uverse. I did not have fiber. I had the regular. And then so I got cable-based Xfinity. Yeah. So they put in this super sweet new like home router device thing, right? Because I didn't pay to have my own stuff installed, right? Like I just had them put theirs in.
Yeah.
And they have an app on my phone, right, that I can interface with it, and it's hot. Like I can like assign different items in my house based on IP address. I can assign them to different people. So it shows up and it's like, hey, this is a computer, or hey, this is a gaming console. And so I can put it in the right buckets, and I can turn stuff on and off based on times, right? But the other part of it is like shocking to me is that like I have so much Internet of Things crap on my home network, right?
Yeah.
That like I don't run updates on my bed. It's you know, when you've got like one of those like internet connected devices that seem like such a good idea, like if you're not like there's not a whole
Your
lot
refrigerator with the TV on it.
Yeah, but so if you're not like focused on making sure you've got at least something that like Comcast, Xfinity, Uverse, somebody supporting, right, to make sure it's updated and up to speed. If you're running any of this stuff internally, right, or if you have your own Wi-Fi, right, if you decide not to use Xfinity's and you have your own Wi-Fi set up, like, and you're not turning the defaults off, if you're not changing the administrator account and password, like just basic stuff, it's not seriously. You could like go online and find a video and do a walkthrough, right?
Oh
it's
yeah,
like, it's super. It's not rocket science. So
you remember back in the day when, as a kid, we'd drive through the neighborhoods, and I wouldn't do this.
I've heard of people who did it. I never participated.
Never did this. But you can literally drive through somebody's neighborhood and you know, ping the wireless devices that you drive by, and then access those with the default admin username and password. Like I could get in my neighbor's stuff if I wanted to, because the odds are they didn't change that stuff. No. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Andrew, but this is what it is, right? And now that we're all working from home, it's created all these less secure points that I can get at executives and get at senior level employees that I couldn't get before, because we don't have the corporate firewall. We don't have the corporate infrastructure. So it's a real issue for sure.
I knew somebody once that lived in an apartment complex, and their upstairs neighbors were like they were part of like the international like clogging association or something, and they're incredibly loud and rude. They're also smokers, and they would like ash on the balcony of this place that I knew of that I didn't live at. And there was a time where some people there was a party at this house, and so the cloggers were getting loud, and so somebody logged on to their open SSID for their wireless and went in and used the default username and password that was already on the device to change the SSID, reset the username and password, and reboot the device.
Wreak a little havoc.
Yeah. So if they, that was
the 90s, man. That was Wild West back then. You could do whatever. It was fine.
Yeah.
It was no big deal.
That's an important thing to remember, right? So keep your home network secure. It's also very, very good stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about digital transformation. I touched base on it earlier. So we're going to kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today. But again, 10 years in the last 6 months, right, is what we're hearing, is that people have digitized so much of their life and so many of their processes, and everything is now part of either some software application in the cloud as a SaaS service, or you're using VPNs to get back to your office, right? Everything's becoming digital, right? A lot of companies don't have the luxury of that quick heads up that you get by being in the office, where somebody pops their head up in a cube farm or something and says, hey, did y'all get that email? That was weird. Or like if I were to get an email from Branson or something, or he'd get one from me, he'd be like, literally we'd scream out like, yo, like, did you send this to me? Like, no, like, wasn't me.
This doesn't look normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's really important. Like, and we talked about this a lot with digital transformation, is digitizing processes is really awesome, but you can't just forklift what you used to do and then just do it digitally. Like, you have to utilize the tools, right? And you've got to be more, there are processes that have to change. So we're going to talk about these 20-second things that you can do, right, that really fit well into any environment, but especially with what digital transformation has been going through. So one of the things we do want to touch base on is user hygiene, right? So in the time that it takes to wash your hands, just 20 seconds, right? We all know about this, like happy birthday twice. You can prevent a lot of illness, right? So we love this analogy, and we want to apply it towards the idea of what people can be doing on a regular basis as they live their normal lives, right? As we're all trying to get back to some new normal, right? So if you go somewhere weird and you don't feel comfortable, and you've been out, like you wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
Right?
Yeah. You do.
For Dan.
I gotta wash right now. This is
Gotta
urgent.
wash the
Dan,
dirt up.
Dan doesn't have to wash his hands anymore. Like
No,
he's
I'm immune. I'm good.
Yeah, he's got.
I'll never
antigen.
wash again.
So gross. But with the email, with email and other security protocols, it's that latency that people don't want to have, right? Like where I don't want to stop. Like I'm right in the middle of something. Like I just need to click on this, right? Or they get busy and they're in the middle of the day, and that's not a habit for them.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what we want to talk about is like what Dan was talking about was phishing, right?
Yeah.
And like one of the most important things a person can do is to take a few seconds when they get an email that's kind of weird, right? And look at it. And Branson and I were talking earlier, like you were telling me about just some basic things that people can do, right? That when they get an email, like what needs to be ingrained in them as they go through their day and they're now kind of away from everything and maybe distracted by their dogs and kids and non-work stuff.
I mean, the way I like to think of it is there are basic things that we as individuals put into emails ourselves. When you look at an email address, if you're expecting an email from say your banking
your
firm,
bank, dude, they do that a lot, right?
Your bank,
will send you or they'll fish you
so
as the bank, right?
Mm-hmm. So if you see Chase and there's a C instead of an S somewhere that you're expecting, it's very easy. They change one letter and it can get you. Sometimes you'll miss it, but if you're not looking, it's very easy to look over it. Misspelled email address, misspelled any misspelling. We were talking about it, and it's really interesting that all of these phishing emails have specific grammar mistakes in them. So read through the subject line, read through the body of it. If it just doesn't make sense, I've seen that there are nonsensical sentences in there that I'm just like, no one even tried. But the reality is if you don't comb through and take the 20 seconds to look through the entire body of that email, you can miss it and just click on something.
Sure.
And Dan really spoke to it, but the urgency. If it came from your bank and you didn't review it, you might click on something really quickly.
Yeah. And with all of it's interesting. We have clients in the financial related industries, and the havoc that the coronavirus has done to like tax deadlines and all this other stuff, right? It's created all these weird deadlines that didn't exist before and everything's super strange. Well, that also creates like some concern and anxiety and like speed at which you need to do things. You need to apply for this PPP loan right now. You need to click this. Oh, I do need that. Click. Right. So there's a really, it's really concerning because all these different things are coming together where it's like a perfect storm of stuff to fish you about. Right. It can be any of these things, and people, they look legitimate and you click on.
Yeah. It's too, because we were laughing about, we'll talk about like, the dark web and stuff in a minute, but like, it's hilarious to us that like these hackers can be so good at like aggregating all of this data off the dark web and integrating different databases and sources to be able to identify information about your personal data. Right. But they're like, I
can't write a sentence.
You're like, what do you mean I is bank? Like that doesn't make any sense to me. They're not all terrible at grammar, but a lot of them are terrible at grammar.
Yeah. It's a big tell for sure.
Enough of them.
But there are some, just to be sure, there are some that are not terrible at grammar. There are some that will infiltrate your network and they will sit and watch your emails go back and forth because they've got your password somehow from before. Yeah. Right. We'll talk about like ways that you can not have people with your passwords, and they'll wait for you to like go fishing or something, or like go out of town, and they know, and then they'll start emailing out as you, or they'll email your boss because your boss. They'll email out as your boss because they know that he's out of town, and their grammar is impeccable, right? And then they force that sense of urgency thing, right, on you, and they start asking for things that are kind of weird. So that's why we always say, if something happens that's outside of standard protocol, take the 20 seconds, read the email, look over it, and it's like doing push-ups. Like after a while, you'll get faster at them, you get better at them. Like you don't have to spend as much. Like what are you like the hover over, right, Branson? Like what is that?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. Hovering any hyperlink that you see within an email or online, you can hover over it and they'll show you where it goes.
And you brought up hover with your mouse cursor. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, you take your mouse and you just take it and hold it. You don't click it, right? That's the key.
That's the gun safety we talked about.
Gun safety, don't click it.
Yeah, no finger on the trigger. Do not put your finger on the mouse button.
Yeah. and see where it goes. And people will inadvertently click it, especially if you're on a laptop and a trackpad. So be very, very careful.
Yeah.
I wanted to piggyback on that just a little bit, that in your 20 seconds that you would look at an email and try to figure out mentally if it's legitimate or not. If at the end of the 10, 15 seconds, you just don't know, if you're not 100% sure, terrific. Call your IT team, call us, call your MSP and say, look, I got this thing. It's very weird. It doesn't seem legitimate. What do you want me to do? And the folks that work for us and your IT people should be able to look at that and pretty quickly determine. And if they don't know, we'll just err on the side of caution. And what I mean by that is you can always call the bank. You can call anybody that's emailing you something and say, is this legitimate? And they're gonna be the final say and say, yeah, this is, and let me walk you through it.
Well, and a lot of there's a lot of technology out there that's frankly not very expensive. Like it's pennies a month, right? For a lot of organizations, right? Per person to do simulated phish testing, right? Where they actually try to force, they send out these fake emails to try to trick people into clicking them. And then they make them do training, which takes 15 minutes, right? Out of your life to educate you on this stuff. So you're just thinking about it. But then it's that, what'd you call it? Gamification, right?
Gamification.
Of the program.
Yeah. And what I see across my client base is that the folks that pay for that and that have been using it for some time, they all love it across the board. There hasn't been one client that I've got signed up for those systems that have come back to me and said, I don't really want to pay for this. It doesn't do anything for us. Not one. And what I've seen is really neat. And the way these systems work is they send out phishing emails to your staff, unannounced, and they're all different kinds of emails. It's not like the same one to everybody. It's all different stuff. And then your entire team gets these emails over a few weeks, and some people click them and some people don't, and some people call their IT team and so on and so forth. Well, the way the program, the one that we use works, it gathers all this data and it presents that data to whomever. It can be to, your IT director. It can be to your HR team. It said, look, here's our baseline. We had this many people click, and these are the people that clicked. And that's where we're starting. That's our initial batch of data that we want to make better. So then over time, you set up these reoccurring events where it does the same thing. And what you're trying to do is gamify it, where the end user, once they're alerted to the program and they know how it works and they have to take training, they see something come in kind of sneaky and they're like, hey, IT guy.
There's nothing better than
that we're going to get. And so that's right. And they come back to the IT staff or the HR and they say, I see you were trying to get me. And it's fun and it's gamification. And everybody talks about it in the break room. They tried to get me today. And over time, what we expect to see and what we do see is the people that clicked the phishing attempts at the beginning, they don't click them anymore because they've learned and they talk about it and they get smart, and your stats get better and better and better as a company. And across the board, like I said a second ago, people love it. It's really effective and it's cheap relatively.
Dan, I have to say, I'm one of the people that love it because I love the templatization of it, that you can build different things for different spaces. So if you need banking ones, you can.
Yes.
But for people like us, we started with when Marvel was coming out with some of their big movies. We sent out promotions for Endgame, and we ended up getting a couple people that clicked it. Why? Because they wanted to see the information behind
the urgency. So we talked about it at the beginning.
It's the urgency. It's about getting them in.
Yeah. I want to make sure I'm clear about something, Branson. Like, you just showed your nerd to everybody, right? You're all like, it's hot. Like,
Marvel
banking
movies.
Templates.
I'm perfectly fine with that.
And Marvel. I was like, wear it, man. Wear it proud. That was good.
Let it fly, man.
Yeah.
But those emails came out looking hot. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's a great idea.
So we're going to talk a little bit about password management, right? For safety. And that's the next super important thing you can do. And we hear this a lot from C-levels, right? And I'm a C-level and I get it. Like, one of the things that I feel is super important for people to realize is that people in powerful positions within organizations wield a lot of authority with their passwords, which sometimes they don't necessarily know they have, right? Whether they're the admin on a certain application or they're in charge of some sort of financial process or whatever, right? And their email is subject to some of those workflows. But they're also the people that don't want to be bothered with passwords, right?
Yeah.
Right. And they like to it's easy just to have one password for everything. Right. This happens a lot. Right. And we also hear man, it sounds really hard to have different passwords for everything. Right.
Right.
So like they keep them like, and some of them will try and they'll keep them in like an Excel
Spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You
know,
it's password protected though. That's the important part.
In fairness, if they're managing it, if C-levels are managing their passwords without some type of formal way to do it that's secure, it is hard. I wouldn't want to do that. You have 100 different passwords. You make them all the same, then they're all insecure. So we've tried to solve those problems with the C-levels for years, and password management applications are a terrific way to do it.
It doesn't, it's actually faster in a lot of regards, right? Like a lot of people are like, well, this will take me extra time. Yeah, it takes time to set up and that sucks, right? Like, and it's arduous. I'm not going to lie. Like it took me 2 days to go through everything that I had and set up all my passwords. But you know what? None of my passwords are the same and they're all really nasty. And there's 2FA on my password vault, which we'll talk about in a second, right? The importance of two-factor authentication. So that extra few seconds it takes to reset a password is something that is completely different than your other passwords, and using a password manager, right? Like which one do you use, Dan?
I use Dashlane.
And
I wanted to, it is. And I wanted to say something to make, some people may not be familiar with how these things work. Basically for the way Dashlane works, the way LastPass and the ones we're going to talk about, you have an initial master password that you use to get into the platform, right? Whether or not you log in on the application, you log on a web page or your phone, you have one that you have to remember. So that's the key. You don't have to remember all this stuff afterwards. So you log into the application and then basically you'll go to all the sites you normally go to and it will remember. You don't have to think about it. It'll remember those passwords, right? It's as simple as that. And you can tell the system to make it 15 characters long with numbers and letters and symbols. You don't have to. You don't have to worry about that because the software is going to figure that out.
But does Dashlane work on your phone and your?
Yes, sir. It does. So the way I use it, and probably similar to how y'all use it. So I have the platform and it has all these great features. But what it does is any website I go to, anything where it has a password field, and that's on my phone or in my browsers on any computer. I have a Mac and I have a Windows computer I use it on. What it does is it's smart enough to know this is a password field. So it, generally speaking, I'll enter my username. And then the actual web plugin on the browser will then enter me. It'll give me the option to say generate a strong password. So I'll click it, and I don't even know what the password is. It just enters it in there, and then I save it. And it's smart enough to handle all that. And if I did have to get into it and figure out what that password was, I can just go and show the password. But that's the real power of the thing. But there's all these great features. The one I use, and probably LastPass as well. So it'll tell me if I have matching passwords. So say I have a bunch of really old stuff and it's all my, my password that I had back in the early 2000s or whatever. It tells me that, or it'll say,
what was the password? Was it all like Dan is awesome?
Dan totally is going to get COVID in 2020 is what it was.
You would be
that sounds like a pretty secure password. That's enough characters.
With like an @ sign instead of an A for Dan.
Smart, and an exclamation at the end. That's the way to make anything secure. But the actual platform does all this cool stuff. So it manages all the passwords and it keeps up with those. But it'll tell me things like all these apps share the same password, so you should change them. It'll run dark web scans for me, and we'll talk about that in a second. And it'll tell me when any of those usernames and passwords has popped up on the dark web, which is really powerful. And the one I use is free. Like it's absolutely free. I don't pay for it.
But you don't use that one, Branson, do you? You use something else.
No, I use LastPass. But actually, I want to talk about that a little bit, answer a question that Allison posed, because it's really a direct story that I wasn't managing my multiple passwords, but a large part of password management is the understanding that you have the same passwords across those multiple places. So for me, it was a point in time that I could rectify
like
that.
What multiple places? What are you talking about? Like, are you talking about Gmail, LinkedIn? Like, is that what you mean? Like what?
So I have a lot of personal stuff, but as we gain more and more places to log in at work, you start running out of ideas. So you start to use the same password for passwords, for personal and business applications.
So you're saying password, really like poor passwords is just a lack of creativity?
I believe so. I believe so. If you ask me, I think so. Maybe you could choose one kid and keep one kid for passwords for work and passwords for at home.
That's a terrible idea. Don't do this.
So this is a super funny story, right? So we didn't even talk about this earlier. So you talk about that, like there's like a competition with my wife because sometimes she'll have to tell the kids what her password is to then get on like Amazon or something to get on her computer. So she'll use certain parts of the kids' like birthdays or whatever in the passwords. And it's funny because you can see that they're thinking, why'd you use her password?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Like, why does she get the computer password and I get the DoorDash password? Like, that sucks. Right.
Yeah, it really does.
I think it's funny.
I'll say, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Francis.
Just for getting a password manager set up, the way that I decided to do it was I took one afternoon and I decided I'm going to set up my account. I set up the extension within Chrome, and then I just started logging into my different websites.
Yeah, and it just retains that information every time.
It retains it, and if I had a unique password, I left it. If it came up as a duplicate, I just let it generate a brand new password. And I think the beauty of it is you can get it set up that first time, but the next time that you have a password expire, you don't have to set anything else new up. You can just go ahead and allow it to generate a complex password for you and save it there, and then you have it updated. So I think for me, it took a lot of anxiety away from, 90 days from now, I'm going to have to set up a brand new password that's complex somehow.
Well, you circle back to like what you were starting to kind of talk about, and it was that like you've got, like, I understand what you mean. I was like, you've got a Gmail account, you got a LinkedIn account, you got all these other accounts, right? And they've got this email address that you use to log in, right? So let's say you're using your personal Gmail account to log into LinkedIn, right? So it's got that in there. If that LinkedIn account's compromised and you use the same password there that you did at Gmail, that you did on DoorDash and your bank or whatever, well, now people can easily use that same password to just attack you any place. So having changed your password in multiple places and having it completely different everywhere,
right.
If you get a breach, like it's happened to me before, it's like LinkedIn has been like, your account's been compromised. I'm like, so I just go in and I change the password. I have multi-factor authentication set up, which we're about to talk about. And it just, I don't care because I know that none of my other accounts have this 32 character super password on them.
Right. Right. One of the goals of the dark web and information sharing on there is those folks are smart enough to understand that they can piece together information that comes from a bunch of different hacked sources to put together a profile on you. And what I mean by that is, say your LinkedIn is compromised, right? Your work email is there and your name and your password potentially. So those are three pieces of information, put those to the side. Then your Gmail's compromised. It's your name, so they can associate it to the same person, maybe a different password, but maybe that has your address. So they're building this set of information on everyone, and you can actually, Dashlane will tell me what's in there and what's been compromised. But one of the goals is to gather all this information from all these different sources and put together sort of profiles on people where then you can attack them.
Which is amazing, considering they can do that.
And not spell something right.
Like I is bank, password yes.
Yeah.
Click,
and
please.
I wanted to say to Allison too, she said, how long does it take to set up? Well, I don't know, 30 minutes to set up the little application on your phone and in your browser and download it, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, maybe at the most. But then over time, it's going to inherently sort of, as you log into different websites, it's going to build its database of your passwords. Yeah. And so it's very minimal setup.
It took me I spent a couple of days because I just wanted to get it done.
Yeah, get everything.
Right? It's like cleaning out your garage. Like you could do it over a few weeks, but I was just like, man, I'm on a roll. And it was crazy because I'd find, I've told this story before, I found that because it'll go through my browser cache and it'll look at my history of like cookies and stuff, and it would be like, hey, do you want to reset this password? And I was like I haven't been to Longwood Country Club in like 24 months. Like I don't, why do I even have an account for that? Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, which is wild.
You'll find stuff years and years and years old that has a legitimate password that you didn't realize when you went to this country club one time. Like, oh man, and then they get hacked because they don't have modern software.
And the 20-second rule for me on those is if you don't think you're ever going to log back into those systems again, go change the password. Don't just cancel the account. Go change the password to something nasty, then disable or deactivate the account, right? And just don't log back into it, right? You don't need it. Don't keep it out there. So
good habit.
So we're going to talk about multi-factor authentication, right? And this is the other 20 seconds that I hear a lot. And this happened very early on in my tenure at IronEdge Group, as we had some folks that were not excited about us putting 2FA at the time, or what they call multi-factor now, on our apps, right? Because they were like, oh, this sucks. Like this is so
internal, right, Andrew? These are our own employees that didn't.
Yeah, it's like, what a pain in the ass. Like every time I have to log into something, I got to enter this code, and I'm like, so
it's an extra step.
Yeah. But it took a while culturally, even for an IT company, right? With my DNA of wanting us to be secure, right? To adopt this and move it forward. So I can understand where a lot of organizations are like, look, this is hard and I don't want to do it. But the ability to use like text messaging or like an app to do it, Branson, I don't know why people, I have it set up on everything, right? Like even my personal stuff, right? Not just work stuff.
Yeah. For me, that's always the interesting thing. You see random people get. For me, I love the random Ray-Bans for $24.99 on Facebook. For me, that's my favorite ad because all it shows is that somebody's account got hacked. And for me, that's simple password protection. So even things like Facebook, Twitter, those accounts allow you to put multi-factor authentication. You log in with your regular password, a complex password that you've updated, and then you get a text message to your phone. You have a Google Authenticator app. There are a number of different apps that work in different ways, but even Microsoft has their own built-in that you just hit accept. But even just having that that second level of protection on all your accounts protects you. For people that have some of those same passwords, it'll stop that it'll add that second layer of protection.
Absolutely happened to me the other day with a client that I help. So I've got an interesting story. So the other day, actually, I'll take it back. A few months ago, I got with one of my clients and I said, okay, I want to roll out this multi-factor solution in your Office 365. And they're like, that kind of sounds like a pain in the ass. I'm like, it is a little bit, but here's the value. And we talked about it. And they said, okay, let's start with 4 or 5 people, just our top executives and maybe, our main sort of office manager. Let's start with those people and see if we like it. So this is months ago.
Let me quickly interject. This is free, right?
Yes.
This is a free part.
This is free.
Anything that you do and in part of Office.
In Office 365. Yeah. And actually in everything, it's just free, right? The ability to do this is baked into everything now. In particular, to what I'm talking about was Office 365, to have it turned on in that platform. So we started with 4 or 5 people, and over a few days, we didn't get any calls on it. Everybody seemed to like it. It went really well. And, a few months go by and they're like, we're really concerned about security out in the world. Like, this is relatively recently. Can you turn it on for everyone? Sure, we can do that. So we turned it on for everyone. Probably took 2 days on and off of calling people, make sure they had it turned on. Well, no sooner than we did that, one of the people that we were working with got phished. And so they entered their username and password, right, to the phishing, to the bad actor, right? Mm-hmm. So then what happens is, because multi-factor was installed, someone else cannot access their Office 365 with their username and password because they didn't have the multi-factor key. Now there's other ways that people try to get your multi-factor information,
which we've seen
absolutely relatively recently. But because the client decided that it was a good time to roll this stuff out, it prevented who knows what from happening. It was a terrific deal.
Yeah, the multi-factor stuff it's not that like every time you open Gmail, you have to enter it in. Like it's right. When you log in. Like you can leave a session open, mm-hmm. right? But if somebody goes in and tries to change your username and password, right, you'll get a notification like on your phone or something, and it'll be like, hey, are you trying to do this? Like enter your code.
Yeah,
that's an important piece, Andrew. Even Microsoft allows you to check that box, keep this device secure for 14 days.
Yes,
it understands you're using the same
yeah.
device, but we still need to verify that it's you.
Yeah,
right.
But go ahead. I was just going to say that extra 20 seconds is invaluable.
Oh, it's huge. And what my client found out was it wasn't really that big of a deal because, every time you get on a new computer, which is kind of rare, maybe at home you get on that, or you potentially use a new browser session or a new device, which really isn't that often, that's when you're prompted, right? Yep. Generally speaking. And so you'll get a prompt when that happens. Otherwise, it goes X amount of days and then it prompts you again. And it's really not that impactful.
So, I want to touch on something here, right? Because people are like, what's my ROI on this, right? People want to get their get out their bankers, like their little like green ledger hat and then like their glasses. They're like, how much am I? So most of this stuff is free, right? Or very little money.
Yes, very little.
Right? Comparatively speaking. And I'm not kidding. Like we have seen it with either other organizations that are MSPs that we know in the wild through the newspaper articles, or with our own clients. Had some of these things been in place, these little 20-second best practices would have saved, I'm not kidding, millions of dollars. And not millions of dollars over 100,000 people. I'm talking millions of dollars in certain instances, right? We know of organizations where $1 million was lost due to a breached account and a phishing attempt, a direct spear phishing attempt was created, right? We know of companies where hundreds of thousands of dollars was transferred to the wrong account multiple times over many months before anybody caught it, right? Had there had been some protocol in place, or the passwords hadn't been compromised and 2FA had been in place and people had been up to speed on phishing and done some training like this, these things wouldn't have necessarily been an issue. So again, and I know it's always like, well, you know, there's no immediate ROI. This is risk mitigation, right?
Yeah, it's massive.
Super important. Well, it's like washing your hands, right?
Yeah.
I don't have COVID now. Well, it's because you keep washing your hands.
Yeah, the hard costs are basically nothing.
Yeah.
Now you're going to need to coordinate with your IT team or someone like us or a third-party consultant to set this stuff up and to ensure you have a smooth rollout on whatever you decide to put in place. And there's a little bit of labor cost to that, generally speaking, unless it's internal. But it's in the, you know, hours, not dozens of hours.
Your internal team has to accept it. That's the other part. Like not just accept it, like as we've said before, it has to be codified into what you do, right? Your HR team has to be like, hey, you didn't take your phishing training. Like, I'm gonna write you up if you don't get it done. Like, otherwise people just won't do it.
They just won't do it. Yeah.
I like saying that your executive team has to be the champions for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the do as I say, not as I do situation. And we have seen in other situations where that's actually more dangerous because the executives are the ones that are targeted.
Yeah. They're the big targets.
Everybody's targeted. So want to finish up. We talked real quick about physical assets, right? And physical security, which, you know, a lot of people don't give as much truck to when they talk about IT security, right? But one of the things that we think is really important is laptop encryption.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That's pretty important stuff, right? Because everybody's working remotely now. And I've heard I don't want to have to remember another password because honestly, the password vault stuff doesn't work for an encrypted computer. You have to remember a complicated password when you first log onto the computer before you'll allow you to boot and get into your operating system and use Windows or Linux or whatever it is. But it's super important because if your laptop gets lost or stolen, anything that's on that computer, if the drive isn't encrypted, anybody who's not even very technical can remove the hard drive, right, without having to crack your password, plug it into another computer, and they just get all your files.
Yeah, right.
It's super ridiculous how easy it is to get files off another computer. So don't just think because, well, I got a password on my computer. Like if your hard drive's not encrypted, like that password means nothing. Yeah. I can't get in and I can't run your apps, but I can certainly pull your files off. And a smart enough person could figure out how to connect to something with it if they had enough time with it.
Yeah, this is another thing that's very inexpensive. One thing to note, if y'all are, if you're considering putting in a hard drive encryption in place for your company, well, there's a certain level of chipset that your computers need to support.
It's like a TPM chip or something.
It's a TPM chip, and most modern computers that you buy, they're not stuff you buy at Best Buy, but actually stuff like we would sell you from Dell or HP or whatever. Most of those now have the appropriate chipset to provide the encryption, but sometimes they don't. So the reason I say this is if this is something that you're interested in, you're like, yeah, we have tons of laptops out in the field. We feel like they get stolen every once in a while. We want to put encryption onto these laptops. We want to turn it on basically. Well, they have to have the certain level of chip. So then when you're doing your procurement for your machines, year over year, and this is something that interests you, make sure you get that as a feature. And you can ask us about it. You can ask, if you have a CDW guy, you can ask him about it, whatever. But that's something that has to be in place. Just companies sell stuff.
I've never heard of those guys.
Yeah. And one more thing, it's easy to manage all those passwords and such if you have a domain. So most of our clients, most of them have a domain. And then what you can do is you can set up the infrastructure to support managing the encryption passwords via the domain.
And even if you don't, there's Azure services that you can use to do it.
There's other ways to do it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it and make sure everything is secure. And then the other physical security thing to talk about, which is there's a couple of them, right? When I talk about physical security, again, it seems weird because like nobody's in the office, but like having some RFID like way of getting in and out of your office, like knowing who's coming and going, having security like in place, especially in like larger organizations where you might have people that'll follow into a building. There's somebody that's very close to me who was telling me a story about how they worked at a large organization here in Houston, down in the Woodlands, and there was this kind of an odd duck who had from time to time talked to this person and some of their friends that work there, and one day that person saw him walking into the office, and she started, chatting him up, and they all walked in together, and they got off on like the 4th floor. And as they were, and this person was saying, the person that followed him, who trailed him in, was just like, complaining about their meetings that they had that day and how busy they were. And then within a few minutes, like, security rushed in and grabbed that person and yanked him and dragged him out. That person had been fired like 3 days earlier and had trailed somebody in, right? So it sounds weird, and I know with social distancing, it probably won't happen as often, like in the near future. But just those are things that you need to be aware of, right? Making sure that you've like locked stuff down, and then even like at a smaller level, like your physical assets, like in your office, like if you've got a server or a network closet. I know a lot of people don't bother to lock those because they're like, well, that sucks. It's hard to get in and out of, right? Like lock it, right? Like just put a lock on it just so that somebody doesn't come in after hours and take your stuff. And even like, especially now, if you're not constantly in your office, like we had the opportunity to replace the television in our lobby because, it was right when COVID started and somebody decided that,
we were presented with an opportunity.
Provided.
Yeah. Yeah. We had the opportunity to get a new television, right? No, our lobby wasn't secure. It was part of an open area in our office building. But I mean, it's still like, if people aren't, and it literally took us like a week before we realized it. Like if we were coming and going from the office, like we'd have noticed it the next morning. But I think our bookkeeper went up there and she's like, hey, did you take the TV out of the lobby and go hide it somewhere? And I was like, nope.
They hid it from us.
Yeah, that's just gone. So
yeah,
lock doors.
Yeah, another good reason that I tell my clients to try to secure that stuff is not only just from a security standpoint, from a stability standpoint, right? Like if you have a half rack sitting in an open area with all of your servers and network gear and stuff like that, or there's not a door to that closet and people have to go in to mess with something. From a stability standpoint, people can jostle cables, they can inadvertently bump the server and pull the power out. Like there's a lot of other, in addition to just the main security component, there's real concerns with having that stuff just sort of accessible by anybody. And people can go in and just plug stuff in and just try to fix things. And so for all of those reasons combined, you really want to get that stuff where people can't get to it.
Yeah. True story. We had a client, not here, but in my previous life, where I showed up because their firewall wasn't working, and I got to their branch office and they literally had the coffee machine on top of it, and it was sitting in the kitchen on the kitchen counter in this branch office, and someone had spilled coffee all over it, and they were frustrated that we weren't more proactive about managing their infrastructure.
Yeah,
I had the firewalls down.
Yeah.
I was just talking about stuff out in the open environment at something I did years ago. I was with a coworker, an IT guy, and we went into this client site, and there's basically all this IT equipment sort of sitting out in the middle of, where these people operated and stuff. And I always joke about the story that this guy's rear end kind of knocked that equipment and unplugged it and took the entire site down. So for that reason, you get the stuff locked where it's hard to get to and people can't bump it and move it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that's the end of our presentation today. We want to thank you guys for joining us, and we look forward to continuing to work with our clients on these initiatives if they're in progress or if we're continuing to update your security program. If you have any questions for us, feel free to ping us, and hopefully our account management team or our sales organization will be able to follow up with you and see how we can help. You guys stay diligent, stay secure. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you guys very much for everything, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Have a great one.
Yep. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.